30 years ago, I was invited as part of a team of 12 river guides to raft in the Soviet Union at a time when communism was still very much in force. After 55 hours of travel from the United States by jet, small plane, tiny car, we ended up in a small city in Siberia. Our final destination was the river launch point that could only be accessed by second-hand helicopter. We loaded up our gear, climbed aboard, and held on tight. But we trusted the pilot because we knew we had at least one thing in common. Everybody's life was on the line flying over those mountains. We were in Siberia to explore rivers for the first ever Soviet and American youth rafting team building trip. After 2 days of launching, we came to this remote, isolated village on the side of the river, and we walked ashore, and I remember thinking to myself, we're afraid of this country? We're actually afraid of these people? As we walked into town, the locals ran and hid behind their curtains, slamming their cabin doors behind them. They were afraid too. After a few minutes, a couple of older gentlemen came out and talked with us through the interpreter. They said something that sticks with me to this day. They said, "You Americans are not the barbarians our government told us you were. You're friendly." Here we were in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles from Moscow, in a town literally called Reindeer Hunting Village, and these locals had been taught to fear us. But we spent time chatting with them, playing some music, and we came to realize that there was nothing to be afraid of. When I was a kid growing up in San Bernardino, the biggest thing I was afraid of was the ice cream truck not stopping in front of my house every day, but clearly those fears were unfounded. As they were unfounded in Siberia, where the kids had been taught to fear the unknown. But we discovered that we could trust each other, and we chose trust over fear. Experiences like these and many others have taught me that fear degrades communities and trust lifts up communities. And here's what's interesting. We often forget or choose to ignore that we have a choice in that matter, that we can create trusting communities or we can create fearful communities. There's two types of fear. There's biologic fear and there's economic fear. I invite you now to close your eyes for just a minute and think of a time where you truly, truly feared for your life, or you feared for the safety or the health or the well-being of a loved one. Close your eyes and feel that time. We feel fear in our bodies courtesy of ancient hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that are designed to help us survive, that are designed to help us live from thousands of years ago. But today, creature comforts have displaced this need. Imagine this. You walk into a grocery store and you go to the produce aisle and you look around the lettuce bin and there are people in militia wear who are guarding their lettuce because they're afraid that's their only food source. That's ironic, and that's how it can still be in the way of fear. But with rare exception in communities across the country, these ancient fear drivers are unneeded. San Bernardino, California is one exception. In the recent past, the terrorists attacked San Bernardino, California and left 14 people dead. That's real fear. My cousin was one of the first 4 police officers on the scene. They crept in not knowing what lay ahead, hearts pounding, their guns drawn. They walked through a sea of carnage and desperation, real fear. It was like they were on a battlefield, but we're not in a battlefield today. But the courage that they exhibited is matched only by what seems to be this pervasive fear that we still experience in our communities. This is the economics of fear, though. This is industries seeking to capitalize on our fear and peddling fear and making us afraid as if it's a drug that they want us addicted to. National media, insurance companies, Pharmaceutical companies and politicians. Pharmaceutical companies want us to take drugs in order to feel less stress. But the interesting thing is, they make us feel anxious about feeling anxious, which is really a head scratcher. And politicians scream at us to be afraid. The media, the national media, is the most egregious of all, as they peddle fear story after fear story on us, night after night, day after day. Our heads swim in this concept of fear, in this idea of fear that is the economics of fear. Who recognizes these people? There's a good chance you recognize them because the media played their picture time and again after this terrorist attacks in San Bernardino. These are the people that took the lives of 14 innocent people. Who recognizes this person? This is Kim Carter. She's also from San Bernardino. But it's very likely that you've never seen her picture before, even though she's saved hundreds of souls in San Bernardino through her organization, the Time for Change Foundation. You don't recognize her because she has not been chosen by the media, and her story has not been played over and over. This is a prime example of the economics of fear. People like Kim Carter and countless others, unsung heroes in communities around the country, recognize, though, that a trusting community is infinitely more powerful than individuals who are driven by the concept of fear. Now I'd like for you to close your eyes and visualize somebody that you're really, truly, deeply connected to, that you have a deep spiritual, emotional, physical connection. Close your eyes and imagine that person. Oh, it feels pretty good. Maybe we should just stay with that visualization for a while. What you're feeling is compassion and care and kindness and trust. Trust is needed to procreate, to raise families, to build villages. The genetics of trust is as powerful as the biology of fear. And the genetics of trust is infinitely more powerful than the economics of fear. Long before our children are taught to fear, they trust. We're born to trust. One of the best examples of trust in a community is that of paddle rafting, where a group of strangers come together and paddle through the whitewater, working together as a team, depending on each other, depending on the guide, and negotiating the rapids, and then ending up at the bottom of the river with tons of reasons to celebrate. Sometimes the guide screws up, and everybody ends up in the water. The guide can rebuild the trust by illustrating to people that he or she has their best interests at heart. Trust can be rebuilt. In this case, thankfully, the only long-term repercussion is that it's made me a little too stiff to do a really good Macarena. So this trip didn't end tragically, but another could have. On this trip, I was rowing an oar boat where people sit in the raft and don't paddle, they just hang on. On this day, I had very, very precious cargo on board. I had a quadriplegic man in the raft with two others, a friend who sat on his left and a friend his brother who sat on the right, and they held him up, they kept him upright. It was a nerve-wracking day because of the fact that there was a quadriplegic man on board, but it wasn't a particularly challenging river. It was a fun whitewater run until I made a split-second mistake. The entire raft flipped over. Everybody went in the water. The brother wrapped one arm around the quadriplegic man and floated to the surface. Then he grabbed a tree and wrapped his arm around a tree, and he kept their heads barely above water until another guide beached the raft and ran up to him and pulled him out of the river. I was swept 50 yards downstream. I ran back up the bank and helped move the quadriplegic man further away from the river. After a few minutes, I knelt down next to him and I said, "There's only one way to finish this trip. There's only one way out of this canyon, and that's to go down the river." I would completely understand, given the fact that the biggest rapid of the day is right around the corner, if you wanted to go in somebody else's raft. He looked up at me and he said, "No, I trust you. I want to get in your raft and let's do this thing." I learned there and then that humans have an infinite capacity for trust. I almost killed this guy, and he chose trust over fear. I also learned that day to question myself whenever the economics of fear or petty fears get in the way of me doing everything possible to help people and to make my community better. And there's examples and examples and examples of people like this throughout the country, in communities from the West Coast to the East Coast and in between. Josh Kern was a corporate attorney in Washington, D.C. He went to work every day in the white upper-class portions of the community, but knew there were children across the river in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C. who were suffering, because Ward 8 is one of the most violent communities on earth. 3,000 violent crimes a year. Josh knew he could do something better, and he decided to create a charter high school, a public charter high school called Thurgood Marshall Academy. He went door to door, town meeting after town meeting, trying to convince the locals that he had their best interest at heart, that he could start a school where students could feel hope and trust as opposed to fear. He opened Thurgood Marshall Academy on what was once a corner of murder and mayhem and is now a beacon of opportunity. He chose to open a place where kids could come and feel trust in a sea of fear. The other high school in this neighborhood has a dropout rate of 43%. 43% of the kids do not finish the other high school. But every single senior at Thurgood Marshall Academy has gone on to college. They've graduated and gone on to college, and they've come back to Ward 8 and made a difference in their community by illustrating the power of trust over fear. So how do you make your communities more trusting? Make good connections. Listen to your heart and listen to other people's hearts, and disconnect from those that stand to profit from the economics of fear. Disconnect from those. Be someone who listens to your neighbors and listens to your own heart. This can lead to seeing the world in a much different way. For example, recognizing that Muslim immigrant families just want to move here for a good life, and they're not here to hurt you. And it allows you to get to know your neighbor and listen to your neighbor instead of sound bites or commercials that are designed to scare you. Second, be dependable. Trust grows strong among well-meaning people who have a history of depending on each other. Trust is built because of this heritage, not in spite of it. Remember to be dependable by having the best interests of everyone around you's heart. Have their best interests at heart. Lastly, build inspiration. Believe in what you can do and not in what the economics of fear tell you you can't. Take action that inspires others to believe in you and to believe in themselves. Tutor an underprivileged child. Coach a youth sports team. Help a stranger across the street. Start a food co-op. Welcome foreigners who have simple dreams of a safe place to live, just like you and just like I. We all want to spread our wings. We all want to grow. We all want trusting communities, and we can make that happen. I was going to end my speech differently until my 9-year-old daughter, I have twin 9-year-old daughters and a 12-year-old boy, until my 9-year-old daughter gave me this note, and she asked me not to read it until I got on the plane to come here. And in the note, she says great things like, have a safe trip, I'll miss you, it'll be great when you come back. But she says near the end, I wish you lots and lots of luck and lots of hope. This is the most brilliant reminder of why trust matters. Hope grows in trusting places. Hope struggles and even dies in places of fear. My kids, your kids, everyone deserves a place where there is hope, where hope turns into dreams and dreams turns into reality. For your children, for loved ones, for your neighbors, for the people sitting right next to you right now. Create a place of trust. By doing so, you create a place of hope. Trust matters. Trust makes better places. Choose trust over fear. Thank you.